This knit balaclava is made to measure, so it's very easy to adjust it to your own size. This is the finished one, but I tested on this one. The shape is a little bit different. I'll show you how to adjust it later. But more importantly, you can use different weight yarns to make this. As you can see, this yarn is thicker. This is just some scrap yarn that I wound up before. You shouldn't be worried about the stitch number. As long as you get the measurements right, it's very easy to make it fit you. The two things we need to adjust to make the shaping differently is this and this. We're going to begin from the top here, work rows like this, and then we'll pick up stitches along both sides and work back and forth like that and increase at the same time. So increase for some rows and then continue working straight down like that. Do the bottom ribbing directly and then pick up stitches along the front edge and then work the front ribbing. I only wanted to test the pattern, so I didn't make this part long enough. And the front ribbing is quite short as well because I ran out of yarn. But this is very easy to adjust. I will explain how I would adjust it during the tutorial. So this is the yarn I'm going to use. It is 100% cotton, but you can also use acrylic or wool. They're more likely to do a better job at keeping you warm. It calls for 5.5mm needles, and this is the gauge. I've never used this yarn before, so I'm just gonna listen to it and use 5.5mm needles. It's better if you have 4 straight needles. As you can see, we're knitting in 3 different directions. These two are the same direction, but you get the gist. You would need 3 needles here, and then you would have like 1 extra to knit the stitches with, if that makes sense. But I don't know where I put my needles, so I'll just use this circular one. You will also need smaller needles to work the ribbing. So my main needle is 5.5mm and this one is 3.5mm. If you don't have smaller needles, you can just use the same needle to work the ribbings, only that your stitches won't be as small. First, we're going to begin from this part. This is the stitch number we're going to cast on, but I actually want it to be a bit narrower. So I'm going to use long tail cast on and cast on about 8 or 10 stitches. I'll have to see. So that's 8 stitches, maybe a bit more. And that's 10 stitches. I'm going to cast on 2 more stitches because the edge stitches will disappear after we pick up stitches along the edge. Okay, so next I'm just going to knit this little panel. So that's just plain stockinette stitch, 1 row of knit and 1 row of purl. So after you finish a knit row, we're going to purl the next row, get the needle behind the yarn, and purl this row. And then you just alternate between those 2 rows. Knit 1 row and purl 1 row. So one of the changes that I want to make is this part here. I worked some rows and then did increases from here to here, but I don't think I have enough room here. So what I want to do is make this part a bit longer. and then I don't have to do as many increase rows as this, I would still get to the same measurement here. So basically, instead of having a shape like this, it's gonna be something like that, meaning I would have more fabric here. So I end up doing 30 rows, which is about almost 5.5 inches, and that's 13 centimeters. So this length is where your balaclava begins to where your crown is. Your crown is the highest point of your head. And then you can add a little bit more to this length, maybe like 1 inch. So after that, I'm gonna pick up stitches from this edge. My next row is knit, but it doesn't matter which row you end it with. Now I'm supposed to cut my yarn here and pick up stitches along this edge. But I don't want to cut it yet, just in case I need to rip this to make some changes. So what I do is I leave some length here and make a slip knot. Okay, now I'm going to use my other needle to pick up stitches here. So as you can see, that is the first column of V. It's kind of like curling towards the back, and that's the second column of V. I'm going to insert my needle between the two columns from the first row. So here, insert my needle and put this loop on my needle, tighten it. Okay, and then I'm gonna pull it through the space, and then I'm gonna continue moving up. I'm gonna insert in the next space, and then grab the end that's attached to the ball and wrap your yarn around the needle and pull up a loop. Okay, so that's 2 loops. Continue moving up to the next space. Insert needle and pull up a loop. So that's 3 loops. After 3 loops, I'm going to skip the next space, go to the one after, pick up a loop, next space, second one of the 3, and the next one. So 1, 2, 3, and skip the next one. Go to the one after, and just continue doing this. Some people use their left hand to hold the yarn, but I feel like it's much easier if you just use the right hand. Because of the angle, it's easier to pull the yarn through. So pick up your stitches all the way to the very last row here. And then I'm just going to continue knitting using the same yarn. So not this one coming from this needle, but this one, the one we've been using. I'm going to place a stitch marker here. And then I'm going to continue knitting all these stitches. Okay, that's my last stitch. I'm going to knit it. If you're using straight needles, you just stop here and use the next needle to continue picking up stitches. But for me, because I'm using a circular needle, I'm going to pull it through like this. And then continue using this one to pick up stitches. So we're still looking for the first column, but now because we're looking at it upside down, that is the first column and that's the second one. So if you turn it upside down, we should insert in these spaces. Okay, so like that. Okay, I'm gonna pick up one loop. And then I'm just gonna continue doing the same thing, pick up 3 loops and skip one space. Last stitch. So I pulled my needle out, and the next row I'm just gonna knit every stitch. I forgot to separate these 2 sections with a marker, so I'm doing it on my way back. And I'm just gonna continue purling each stitch to this end. And by the way, if you are using a circular one like I am, if you're working in a awkward angle, you can just find a spot and pull the cord out like so. And that would just make it a bit easier to work the stitches. Okay, after that, turn your work. From the next row, we're going to do some increases here and here. So I'm gonna knit to this marker here. Okay, so I'm gonna knit to the stitch marker. The stitch marker actually should be in this one. So I'm gonna take it off. That was my mistake. And I'm going to knit the very next stitch. And you can kind of see where the division is. That is one column. And the stitch marker should be in here, between these 2 stitches. So I'm gonna knit this stitch. And next we're gonna do an increase. I'm gonna go to this loop, and that is 2 rows below the row on the needle. So that's 1 row below, that's 2 rows below. I'm gonna pick up that loop from back to front. It's gonna be a bit difficult. Like that. And then knit this stitch through the back loop. So knit it, and that's it. I'm going to place the stitch marker here, knit all these stitches. Okay, I'm going to knit the very last stitch here. Pull the cord out so it's easier to work the next stitches. Okay, here I'm gonna slip the marker first, and on this side I'm gonna pick up the loop that's 1 row below. So I'm gonna pick it up like this and then place it on my left needle and then knit the stitch. And then you knit the following stitches to the end of the row, turn your work and work 1 row of purl like that. And the next knit row you're going to do increase again. Okay, so when I work to the first stitch marker, I'm going to do the same thing. find the loop that's 2 rows below. So that's 1, that's 2. I'm gonna pick this up like that, and then knit it through the back loop. Slip the marker, knit to the next stitch marker, and this side I'm going to slip the marker first, and the second marker I'm just gonna pick up the loop that's 1 row below like this and place it onto my left needle. Knit that loop and then just knit the rest of the stitches. So basically that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna increase on the knit row here and here at the stitch markers. These two increases are a little bit different, but if you don't remember how to do that, you just rewind the video. And then on the purl side, I'm just gonna purl every stitch. So continuing doing those 2 rows like that. Okay, so this is what I did. I did about 20 rows. So 20 rows of increase, and this increase line measures about 3.5 inches. So that's just my measurement, but what's more important is this, because this is what's gonna be around your head. So that is from this side all the way around your head to this side. In other words, it's your head circumference minus the width of the front opening. So how I decide when to stop increasing is I put this on top of my head and see if this can cover my head, if that makes sense. This one is also 3.5 inches. So after this, I'm gonna continue knit and purl, but I'm gonna stop increasing on the knit side and just continue working my way down until this reaches my neck, so it just covers a little bit of my neck. So I continued working from there until this is 10.5 inches, and from there that's 35 rows, I'm pretty sure. And if you want to count it from the beginning, I have 57 rows of loops, including the one on the needle. So now we're going to join in the round and prepare to work the bottom ribbing. So make sure your next row is purl, and then I'm going to cast on just a few stitches here. To decide how many stitches I need to cast on, I'm going to work 1 by 1 rib, so that means I would need an even number of stitches. So far I have an odd number of stitches, so I'm going to cast on an odd number of stitches, so together it would be an even number. I'm going to cast on 5 stitches. If you need to cast on an even number, you can cast on 4 stitches or 6. So to cast on a stitch, I'm just gonna wrap the yarn around my thumb like this and pick it up using my needle, pull tight, and that's 1 loop. I'm gonna do 5, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Next, I'm going to continue knitting from the other end, but make sure your yarn is at the back, not like this, at the back. Okay, so I'm going to knit this stitch, and I'm just going to knit 1 round. the 5 cast on stitches, just knit them as usual. And then from the next stitch, I'm gonna work the ribbing. So you can place a stitch marker here if you need. So now we're gonna need thinner needles. Because my needles is interchangeable, so I can just do this. I can switch them, but if yours is not, you can just use your thin one and work like this. So now we're going to begin the ribbing. For the ribbing, we're just going to alternate between a knit and a purl stitch. So I'm going to begin with the knit stitch, and then I'm going to bring the yarn around to the front and purl the next stitch, bring yarn to the back, knit the next stitch, bring yarn to the front, purl the next stitch. Okay, so I'm just gonna work knit purl all the way around. When you get to the stitch marker, you're gonna finish this stitch and slip the stitch marker onto your working needle, and then just continue knitting your ribbing. So for the ribbing, I did about 20 rows, and now I'm at the beginning of the round. I'm gonna leave about 4 times this length and cut my yarn. And then I'm gonna use a yarn needle to bind off. So I'm not gonna use the knitting needles to do that. I'll just use this one. So the technique I use is called tubular bind off. I love this bind off because the finished edge with this method is very stretchy, not like with the traditional bind off. And the edge doesn't look like it stops there. It kind of looks like the stitch is going forever. I have a tutorial for this. I'll put the link to this method in the description. So now that I have the bottom ribbing done, I'm going to work the front ribbing, picking up stitches all the way around. I'm going to begin from the bottom here in the middle. So remember we cast on 5 stitches here. I'm going to find the middle one. I can see these 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. So that's the very first stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that should be the first column on this side. Okay, so the 5 stitches is this purl, knit, purl, and this is the center stitch. So for this column, I'm going to pick up the top 2 loops, like so. And then I will make a slip knot. I'll pick up this stitch first. And then I should have 2 more stitches to pick up here before I pick up stitches from this vertical edge. So that's from the purl column. The next column is knit. I'll just find 2 loops and pick up a stitch. The next column is purl. pick up stitch from there as well. And then I'll begin picking up stitches from the very first row here. It's kind of hard to tell, so I'm going to look at it upside down. That row is the ribbing. So this is the first row. This one. So just like before, I'm going to insert between the first and the second columns here. So right here. Insert. And I'm going to pull up a loop, and from here, you've done this before, 3 loops out of every 4 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, skip 1, and then repeat that from the next space. And for these ones, I'm going to pick it up in the V, not like this, in this loop here. And I'm going to pick up a stitch for every V column. Okay, so I've come back around, and then I just need to pick up 2 more stitches from this edge. Again, make sure you have an even number of stitches because we're going to do the 1 by 1 rib. So we're picking up a stitch from the purl column. And then from the knit column again. From here, I'm just gonna knit 1, then purl 1, make my ribbing, and then bind them off with the tubular bind off. And for reference, I did about 10 rows here. So finish the ribbing as I showed you in this video, fasten off your yarn tails, and then it's done.